Good afternoon, one and all. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to call the 141st Commission meeting of the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations to order. I detect a quorum, and without objection, I'll dispense with the calling of the roll and ask that we take up item 1, tab 1 of our agenda, the minutes of the January 2017 meeting for approval. It's been properly moved by Mayor Rowland and seconded by Mayor Huffman and many others. Any questions or comments, changes suggested? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed or abstaining? All right, they're approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Dr. Lippard will next give us the commission and staff update behind tab 2. Dr. Lippard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the first item under the commission update is regarding our sunset legislation, which was passed and signed by Governor Haslam. It is now Public Chapter 116 Acts of 2017, and this extends the commission until July 2021. There was one amendment to the act, which adds an attendance requirement to our bylaws, similar to those found in other commissions, other state commissions. And under this new requirement, any appointed members who miss more than half the meetings in a calendar year must be removed from the commission, and it is my responsibility as executive director to notify the appointing authority for any appointed member who does not satisfy the attendance requirement. And I've included that in when I sent out the tab of information for this meeting to all the members, but just to remind you of that. The second thing is we do have one new member who is not with us this afternoon. Hopefully will be with us tomorrow morning, and that's Senator Thelma Harper, who was appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally to the commission on January 30th of this year. And also Mayor Larry Waters has been reappointed to the commission and was reappointed by Speaker Harwell on March 7th of this year. So welcome back. Then under staff updates, we have a number of staff updates. First, Senior Research Associates Dave Kaiser and Michael Mount each attained 5 years of state service in March 2017. We awarded them the official plaque before the meeting started here. But if Michael and Dave could stand for just a minute and everyone could help me congratulate them. Also, this year we welcomed back Nathan Shaver, who could just not stay away. You all will probably remember Nathan from such exciting reports as insurance in lieu of bonds and privacy issues. Yes, and Nathan's returned to us after a stint at TenCare and some time in the private sector, but it's very glad to have Nathan back. Nathan has a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Administration from the University of Tennessee and a JD from the University of Memphis. Welcome back, Nathan. And then we have one other new staff member, and that's on April 1st. Rachel Jakubowicz joined the commission staff. Rachel comes to us with a rich background in over 13 years of state service, having served as Assistant General Counsel and as a grants analyst with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. Before coming to work for the state, she worked for several years as an attorney in the insurance industry. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science from Farley Dickinson University and a JD from the New York Law School. And she's admitted to the bar in both Tennessee and New Jersey, so that might come in handy. Thank you, Rachel. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the updates.
Thank you. Welcome back, and welcome, Rachel. Glad to have you. One point on the extension sunset review. The legislation, as I recall it, is written in terms of the requirement that one attend at least half the meetings in a calendar year. The legislation, however, is just becoming effective short of that. It's always great to chair a meeting when you get something in your throat, but this too shall pass. So we're going to apply it on a calendar year basis, even though the law may not yet actually have become effective. We'll say that we're applying it to the calendar year, which began in January. So we have 4 meetings a year. This is our second meeting. You need to attend at least half the meetings. And rarely is that a problem with any of our members. We've had the most engaged, if not engaging, membership on TACIR during the last 3 or 4 years that I can recall. But it's just just to be advised that is a new requirement, as Cliff said, imposed on all similarly set organizations. All right, so If there are no questions on that, we'll go on to tab 3, our Deputy Executive Director, Melissa Brown, to reflect and report on the accomplishments of fiscal year 2016-2017. Ms. Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the sound okay?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So as you mentioned, this afternoon I'll be covering the 2016-17 accomplishments. These are behind tab 3 in your docket book. Now, no action is required from the Commission this afternoon on this item. This is for information purposes only, but the information will be included in our next biennial report. Since July 2016, there have been 7 official Commission reports published, which are outlined in the bullets on page 1 of the memo. 2 of the reports listed at the bottom are recurring annual statutorily required reports. The first is the Tennessee Valley Payment in Lieu of Taxes report, which you approved at your January meeting after the presentation by Senior Research Consultant Dr. Reuben Kyle. And the next is the infrastructure report, Building Tennessee's Tomorrow, which you will hear this afternoon and hopefully approve. It'll be presented by Senior Research Associate Dave TACIR. The other 5 Commission reports, as usual, covered a wide variety of topics. Now, 3 of these were referred by the General Assembly, 1 was requested by the Commission, and 1 was by contract with UT. The first report was one on professional privilege tax in Tennessee. The report responded to Public Chapter 1024, Acts of 2016, which directed the Commission to study the history of the professional privilege tax in Tennessee, the intent of the tax, other state laws that impose a professional privilege tax or one that is similar, and suggest alternatives for eliminating or phasing out the tax. The Act also directed the Commission to study the original language of Senate Bill 556, House Bill 678, which would have phased out the tax over 5 years. Excuse me. The chairman's contagious. You were also asked to study Senate Bill 1919, House Bill 1951, which would have exempted some out-of-state professions from the tax, and Senate Bill 167, House Bill 601, which would have exempted audiologists and speech pathologists from the tax. Your report noted that phasing out the tax over 5 years would decrease state revenue by $17.6 million in the first year and by $264 million over 5. Of the reduced revenue, only about a third would have been to the benefit of Tennessee professionals. Senate Bill 1919, House Bill 1951 would have exempted 705 of approximately 141,000 out-of-state professionals and would have cost the state $282,000 per year. Senate Bill 167, House Bill 601 would have exempted 350 audiologists and approximately 1,900 speech pathologists subject to the tax and would have cost the state $930,000 in lost revenue per year. Your report also discussed the concern by some professionals that organize their businesses as limited liability corporations, limited partnerships, or limited liability partnerships, and also pay the privilege tax, that they have been double taxed since the General Assembly passed legislation in 2000 that extended the franchise and excise taxes to limited liability entities. The report noted that a common approach in such instances with other taxes is to provide a credit for one of the taxes against the other. The next report was on legislative compensation of members of the General Assembly. This report responded to Senate Joint Resolution 463, which passed in 2016. The resolution directed the Commission to conduct a survey of Tennessee's surrounding states and compare their 2015-16 legislative compensation to that of the Tennessee General Assembly to determine whether Tennessee legislators are adequately compensated and fully reimbursed for expenses. Your report noted that on most aspects of legislative compensation, Tennessee is similar to its comparison states and really falls close to the middle. Your report recommended allowing legislators to decline all or part of their travel reimbursement so they don't have to incur a tax liability for reimbursements that they don't wish to receive. We could pay a larger office expense to legislators serving geographically large districts. We could use Metro Nashville-Davidson County's boundary as the delineating factor for travel reimbursement instead of a 50-mile rule, and we could compensate legislators for intra-district travel. Your report provided the option of creating an independent legislative compensation commission that would recommend or determine fair and appropriate compensation, which has been done in several states. Next, we completed a report on court fees after concerns were expressed about the recurring practice of fee increases. Your report responded to a request by Senator Lundberg, former chair of the House Civil Justice Committee, in his letter to the Commission of April 13, 2015. The Commission was asked to review all bills passed in the last 10 years that increased any type of fee, describe the fee, how they're being used, and make a recommendation. Your report suggested that Tennessee could provide more thorough analysis of court costs, how they accumulate, and related earmarks through the use of a judicial committee that reviews and makes recommendations on bills proposing to add or increase court cost, review existing statewide fees, taxes, and earmarks to determine if any changes should be made, and examine the effect required driver's license revocations have on people's ability to pay these fees and taxes. You also agreed with the recommendation of the Tennessee Fiscal Review Committee in 2008 that the Administrative Office of the Courts be required to report annually on uncollected criminal case assessments from each county, and that the AOC use this data to examine the relationship between increasing cost and collection rates. There was one report published that was requested by the Commission. The report responded to a request by Chairman Mark Norris, who asked the Commission to study the current status of broadband deployment, availability, and adoption in the state, assess where there are gaps in coverage, evaluate best practices in other states for encouraging deployment and adoption, and recommend ways that Tennessee can increase broadband availability and adoption in the future. Your research found that there are already several government and private initiatives to address both access and adoption, supporting the recommendation that Tennessee should focus its efforts on supporting and coordinating these existing initiatives and on addressing any remaining coverage and adoption gaps. You noted that any government response should focus on working with the private sector, both for-profit and nonprofit, to fill these gaps in the manner least costly to taxpayers without expanding the role of government. Your report includes several supplemental recommendations for encouraging broadband adoption, expanding coverage, and facilitating coordination and planning. We published one staff report in August of 2016 titled Just How Rural or Urban Are Tennessee's 95 Counties. We published one report provided by Grant Contract. The contract was with the UT Howard Baker Center for Public Policy, and this was on the economic impact of open space on residential property values in Tennessee. And this report was presented at the Commission's August 2016 report. Over the past year, staff has provided 4 presentations to various groups. 2 of the presentations related to the Commission's infrastructure report, Building Tennessee Tomorrow, Anticipating the State's Infrastructure Needs. These were presented by Senior Research Associate Dave Kaiser. One was to the Tennessee County Services Association, and the other was to the Tennessee Development District Association. Matt Owen presented an overview of the Commission's broadband report and adoption to the Dickson County Chamber of Commerce as part of a panel discussion that they held in April. And finally, Dr. Lippard presented with scholars from TSU an update of a study prepared for the Commission on sustainable competitiveness. And the title of the research presentation was Research Meets Reality, Studying Interjurisdictional Collaboration in Partnership with Intergovernmental Institutions and Local Officials. And this was to the American Society for Public Administration. Staff also responded to requests for information and assistance from members of the General Assembly and legislative committees, and requests from local government officials, state agencies, lobbyists, the public, and the media. Over the past year, 11 contracts were administered. Now, 9 of these were with the development districts to support the Public Infrastructure Needs Inventory. They gathered the data for us and submitted to our office to Dave. The next contract is with Middle Tennessee State University. This is for our Economic Indicators website. Now, this has been in place several years and has become a really good platform for sharing information on how the Tennessee's economy is doing, both statewide and locally. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, the contract with UT for the report, The Economic Value of Open Spaces. Now, the next section of the memo groups all the accomplishments by policy area and also lists some of our recurring projects, like the fiscal capacity model. Senior Research Associate Michael Mount is going to be presenting an update on that later this afternoon. I would like to call your attention to 2 items under the section Using Technology for Public Information. This past year, we published the county growth plans that are required by Public Chapter 1101 Acts of 1998 on the TACIR website. There's an interactive map, and you can click on the county of interest and access that county's growth plan. And this is really an improvement over what we had before. Previously, we only had them in hard copy. People had to call ahead, give staff time to put that information together. Now they are literally a mouse click away. And I'd like to thank Teresa Gibson and Mark Patterson for working hard to get that information out there. Secondly, we have begun preparation of a fiscal federalism information page for the TACIR website. Now, Research Manager Mark McAdoo has headed up this effort along with other staff in data gathering and development of the page, and he is going to provide a brief demonstration of the site. Certainly, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the information presented.
Questions for Ms. Brown so far? This is, if you stop and really absorb what's been presented here today and all the work that TACIR has done, it's remarkable. It's content rich. As I always say, the web address, the website is here, but all this is online. And as we'll see here in the demonstration of the Fiscal Federalism Report, what's accessible and manipulable online is also very useful, but I think it's incumbent upon all of us, to the extent we can, to communicate to our constituents and also to our colleagues in the General Assembly that there's this treasure trove of information and data available for everyone, going forward. Melissa, if I may, before the demonstration, any follow-up, or Cliff, on the broadband report was a pretty big deal. I know. I think Dr. Owen has actually been asked to serve on an ad hoc committee or a task force. Cliff, I'll yield to you to talk about that a little bit.
Actually, Matt, if you wouldn't mind just coming forward and just giving a very brief recap of what the working group's mission is and who's involved in that. I think it'd probably be the...
Yeah, perfect. Dr. Owen, you're recognized.
Hi. Thank you, Chairman. Good to see everybody at the commission again. Here we go.
I always love, to this moment, I love calling you Dr. Owen because you look younger than my youngest son. And I guess that dates me more than you, but Dr. Owen, please proceed.
So the working group is part of the Governor's Rural Task Force, and the working group is specifically geared towards encouraging broadband adoption at the local level. We just had our first meeting yesterday afternoon, so there's not a whole lot to report yet, but it pulled together participants from a variety of state agencies, including the Department of Health, Department of Tourism, Department of Economic and Community Development, Department of Labor, I believe, and then also the USDA's Rural Development Group had a representative there. And so the purpose, again, as I said, it will be to looking at the resources that are already available in the state and how those might be leveraged by local communities to encourage broadband adoption.
And so I might mention, Dr. Owen, for the members' benefits, as a result of the Broadband Accessibility Act, one of the tasks at hand is for the Department of Economic and Community Development to come up with the rules, if you will, that will apply to the grant funding that's available, because that has yet to be determined. And if you haven't, members, you'll soon be hearing from folks who say, how can we get some of that? And it's going to be very important that it be, properly mapped and accessible for the right reasons. The objective in the act is, among other things, to create broadband-friendly communities and to provide access and adoption. But there are a lot of layers to that onion. As we've talked about, it's a great opportunity. It's a golden opportunity. I'm convinced that we're going to take advantage of the opportunity, but I'm glad that you are on this task force as sort of a working group to help inform the right way for us to go forward, because we'll obviously all be watching, and our constituents will too. Thank you. Questions for Matt? Okay, thank you. Melissa, go ahead. Come on up and show us the fiscal federalism.
Thank you.
There you go.
Norris.
I think it'll work. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
So far, so good.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chairman Norris. I'm Mark McAdoo, and I'm managing TACIR's project on fiscal federalism. And fiscal federalism is the aspect of public finance that deals with the way that federal, state, and local governments share responsibilities for funding and administering programs. And we are monitoring intergovernmental funding information to see how these changes at one level could affect other levels of government. We've previously issued a staff report on fiscal federalism back in 2007, and we're now attempting to organize and update this information so it's more accessible and user-friendly. And staff felt like a website would be the best way to do this, and that's what I'd like to share with you. I'd like to stress that this is a mock-up. It's an incomplete website, and so the information that you see here today can change in the future. Some of these numbers may change, and I would also like to stress that as we build out this website, we'll be sure to include funding information from the federal government and the state government to local governments. But we decided to develop the major federal funding programs first, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. We used 2015 data because that is the most current year that has complete data for all the categories that we're presenting, and we found that in 2015, the state of Tennessee received approximately $70.2 billion in federal funds. This funding came to the state through 4 primary pathways. Direct payments to individuals who received $51.6 billion in direct payments, intergovernmental grants of $6 billion, salaries of $6.2 billion paid to federal employees and military personnel working in Tennessee, and $6.4 billion in federal contracts executed in the state of Tennessee. So we propose presenting this information on the website in multiple ways to meet the needs of different website users. And the first way that we're going to present this information and allow users to access it would be through county level data. So users will be able to click on a statewide map and get a summary of their county information. And that's what you see demonstrated here. Let me make sure this shows up a little bit better. There's a lot of information with all of these categories, so where possible, we tried to present the information in graphs so it can be more easily digested. This first graph shows county level funding compared to statewide totals, and then the next graph, let me scroll down a little bit, shows total funding by category for that county.
Excuse me, Michael, as you go forward, think about this in the context of a metric we frequently use, the General Assembly, and that is that about 40%, 38 or 40% of our budget comes from federal funding. This then is a slice of that. It's not the total, because you've chosen 4 subcategories. In other words, I guess I'm just sort of asking you to explore how what you've captured here relates to that 38 or 40% of our budget. This is all of it?
No, I don't think so. We're not accurately, we're not presenting the information at the local government level at this point. These are total funds from the federal government that come into Tennessee in these categories that I'm presenting here today. So we'll build out the rest of the website that shows both intergovernmental loans from, intergovernmental grants from the federal government and the state government to local governments in later versions. Okay. So we've got more detailed information here below the graphs, and we think that this is probably the best value add that the website has, because it's difficult to assemble this level of county information out on the internet, because there's so many different sources, and so you can access it here with a single click, and we think that's a real benefit.
And I'm just take a second, Mark, while you move on there, just to clarify that the $70.2 billion, that includes, that's not just the money that's shown in the state budget from the federal government. That also includes salaries to federal employees, contracts, and to get to the $13 billion figure, you see the $6 billion in intergovernmental grants. Part of that, part of the $13 billion is actually in our chart here being shown over in the $51.6 billion, which is pass-through money that's going to actually to individuals. But since the end person was the individual, so we'll have other graphs that show how it relates more directly to the budget. Our intent is to slice and dice it so that you can compare it for whatever purposes you need to do.
Thank you, Dr. Lipper. I appreciate that help. And then the next way that users can access information on the website is if they're interested in particular program areas, they can click on a category of funding. And so currently in this demonstration, we've got the category that's going to individuals available. So once again, we present the information in graphical form, so it's easier to digest, and you can click on each one of these graphs and get a more detailed look at the data. This first graph shows total funding, federal funding, in this category of federal funds coming to individuals in the state of Tennessee in 2015 by category. And this next graph shows this information over time, so you can see how these payments fluctuate and see the time trend from 2011 through 2015. And then finally, if individuals want all the dirty details, they can click on a particular program area, for example, Social Security, and you can get county level data for this program area, which in this example is Social Security, for all the counties and statewide totals for multiple years. So you've got all of the data there. So that's our demonstration website. That's what we've got built to this point, but we would like to get insights and guidance and recommendation from you, the Commission, anything you care to share. So thank you.
Although Chairman Watson is not yet seeking recognition, given adequate time to absorb the information, I'm sure that he might. I think part of what we're trying to determine as we see this for the first time is exactly how we might use it and how it might be communicated to various constituencies. First of all, Michael, do you know whether any other states have done this, anything similar?
No, sir. We've, to our knowledge, this doesn't exist elsewhere on the internet, and so we're kind of creating a new methodology, a new tool, and we think that this is a real value add.
So let me recognize Commissioner McMahon here. Isla, if you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick observation, and I'm on the graph, the federal funding for Shelby County. And I get it that they take for instance, Social Security, they take the total amount that Tennessee gets and they look at all of the counties, and the payout to Shelby is ranked number one, and I get that. But is there a way that, and I understand that the methodology being that they're taking in the money and they're looking at the percentage and seeing where it's going. Is there a way that we could also have something to see what the population for each county would be? Because I can tell you Hancock County is not going to be spending as much, but they might have 60% or 50% and higher in Medicaid. And I'm just saying this from a local perspective, because it's nice to know the statewide figures, but that's not helping the county mayors and the local folks.
Cliff, go ahead.
Just a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And actually, Mark, if you could scroll up, I think this is something that was added to the presentation, which does not appear to have made it into the slides, which in addition to showing the percent of the state share for each county, we're also going to show the blue bars there, which are a little hard to see from here. It's actually, I don't think it's actually in here. Mark, could you walk us through the blue bars there? Isn't that's the percent of Shelby counties, or is that also the?
No, the graph on top, which is, I believe, the graph that you're referring to in that presentation, is comparing Shelby County to the rest of the state. But then at your direction, Dr. Lippert, we were able to add this second graph. I apologize that it's not in your handouts, but it shows funding just coming to Shelby County. So in this example, the category of federal funds that provides the most funding for Shelby County, or not for the government, but federal funds coming into Shelby County, is Social Security once again at $2.2 billion.
Commissioner McMahon.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Mr. Chairman, does this mean that if I run my cursor across each county, I can go to a county, click on it, and all those figures will come up for each county? Is that the way that it works, or?
Yes, sir. That's the intent right now. Shelby County is the only one that's active for this demonstration, but we do have the technology already built, and when it goes live, you will be able to.
So that other incremental thing that we're measuring just for that county and what the percentage is for each of these federal programs will be shown if you click on that county.
County specific.
When it's up. Okay,
County
great.
specific.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir.
Yes, sir. Senator Yarborough.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do think this is, I'm not exactly sure how it's useful, but I feel confident that it is. I mean, this just is providing a level of detail and information that I think we're oftentimes looking for in making decisions. A couple of things, I mean, I want to echo that having some sense of the percentage, or even like the per capita, I guess, would probably be the better way of thinking about it. Sense of what federal funding is would be interesting. And the second thing, and I don't know about the availability of this data, but how familiar or how accessible is federal tax payment data?
I think that's reasonably accessible, and Dr. Lippert asked me to have that available. So, for example, in 2015, the IRS collected $62.7 billion in federal taxes from Tennesseans, and then you see by this graph, we received back $70.2 billion. So we're getting more than we gave in this instance.
And is that data, can that be drilled down to the county level as well?
We don't have that set up, but if that is your guidance, I think that could be done. Yes.
I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. Very good.
Yes, Dr. Lippert, you're recognized.
And I know Mark has said this, but I just want to stress again, this is very much still a work in progress. We wanted to kind of bring it to you at this early stage to just give you an idea of where we're heading with it. There's still a lot more thinking to be done on what to include and how to show everything. And it's probably going to be several more months before we bring it to fruition. This was something that has been in our work program for several years. We had done a fiscal federalism report in 2007 and have had it on our list of things to update once we had a chance. And we had a few things like this broadband report you may be familiar with that took us a while to work through. We've had a chance now to go back and look at this, but we decided rather than doing another report that it would be more useful to have something that could be continuously updated and that could be searched on an individual level, so the person could look for what's useful to them from it, rather than us just doing a bunch of tables in another report.
Chairman Watson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I really have a question, not so much about the content, but the maintenance and sustainability of it. This looks like a fairly labor-intensive product. and how this fits into the mission of TACIR. If TACIR is in the business of producing reports as requested by the General Assembly or others, how does the functionality of this and the maintaining the functionality of it and the website operations of it, how does that fit into the mission of TACIR?
Well, it may be above my pay grade to answer that question. Dr. Lippert may be the one to answer, but I'll take a stab at it. I'll say that this is intergovernmental funding information, and so all of our programs are relying on this type of funding. So I think it does align with our mission, in my opinion.
Senator Watson.
Well, I guess the longer term question that I'm asking is TACIR going to be coming before the General Assembly requesting a position in order to have someone that staffs this this annual or this ongoing report?
Definitely above my
Dr. Lippert to respond.
I can answer that. Absolutely not, Chairman Watson. This is something, it took quite a bit of work to set up initially, but it's the type of thing that when we just draw the information into it to update it. We've got experience doing this with our county profiles, for example, and on projects like that, it's never a higher priority than anything that's requested by the legislature. So if the information gets a little old while we're waiting to update it, while we're working on other higher priority projects, then when we have an opportunity, we come back and we pull the information from the different federal sources and state sources. But pulling the information isn't labor intensive, and we were able to do this as a part-time project using available staff, and updating it will be easier than that.
You recognize.
Well, that's my concern, is that that you will put this out there and the public will become reliable on it, and then its publication becomes delayed because the legislature has made other requests of TACIR, and that happens one time, and then the next year you're back before the General Assembly requesting a position because you need someone. I mean, you may not believe it, but I think there's probably much more maintenance to this than you may be prepared to testify to today, particularly if the public starts accessing it and utilizing it, and then they expect it to be produced by a date certain, and it's not produced by a date certain, and then all of us are getting questions as to why the report's not being updated on a timely basis. This is not unlike experiences we've had in government operations with various agencies that have had experienced some level of mission creep. It's a worthy and useful tool, and for it to be created by TACIR might be appropriate, but the question I think this commission should ask, on not today, but on a future basis, is whether this is within the purview of TACIR, or whether the creation of it is TACIR's and the responsibility for maintaining it actually belongs to some other part of the legislature, Office of Legislative Budget Analysis, Fiscal Review, pick any number of other agencies that may be better prepared to maintain it on a longer-term basis. And I'll yield to other members.
I might just think out loud a little bit on that as well. I'm sure there's not any proprietary interest in it per se, and calving it or birthing it off to another entity probably is something that TACIR might embrace. Although I wasn't aware of this particular project, it is akin to a transition that we made on I believe it's the infrastructure report, which will be presented separately here momentarily on today's agenda, where I had suggested that rather than just have a report with text, we do sort of a dashboard approach. And I think in the course of creating the dashboards for that are useful for folks to see, probably TACIR staff on its own realized that a similar function could apply to this. And this came out of a 2007 charge originally, the report on fiscal federalism. So they're probably sort of kin folk one way or another. And so as we see the infrastructure report later today, we'll be thinking about that. But you raise a great point about, it's additional value added. They can create these systems and transfer them over. It may be those other departments don't want them. I don't know. But it's all good good food for thought. Any other questions for Mr. Mount? And yeah, it's very, very interesting work, and particularly with the budget that's about to be presented in Washington, the federal budget, as it comes down, and people wonder what the new administration's proposals really mean to us as individual states and perhaps citizens individually. This tool could be useful in trying to translate that. There's a lot of bashing that goes on about Uncle Sam and the requirements and whether we're tied too closely, whether we're too indebted to the federal government. But when you see that we're getting, at least based on these figures, a greater return than we're investing, there's some value added there. But also that federal component of our funding of the annual budget, I hear a lot of complaining these days that the budget has gone from $26 billion to $27 billion, and you always have to ask in the first instance, okay, are we talking about federal and state dollars or only state dollars, and what does that quote-unquote growth really mean? So these tools could be useful in analyzing a lot of things, and I appreciate it. I'm sure we all do. Any other questions? Good work. When do you think you'll finish? Couple of months?
It's going to be over the next several months that we'll work on developing this website, so we don't have a hard timeline. I'm sorry.
Well, it'd be good, I think, if by our August meeting, perhaps let's shoot for that, so we might have an update.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Anything else that's exciting? Very interesting. So a lot has been accomplished there. So let's move on then to tab 4. We have Rachel here to give the legislative update. Now, this isn't fair. Were you here for the whole? No. So this is.
So bear with me.
All right.
Go easy on the questions.
And I know you were pleased when Cliff properly pronounced your name, not the Jakubowicz, but Rachel. Welcome aboard. This is your maiden voyage, I presume. So thank you. We're happy to have you, and you're recognized.
Thank you. So let's see. You just covered my first page. So I am here today to give you a summary of the legislation that was presented to the 110th General Assembly that is related to any reports or studies that the Commission has done in the past. And how I'm going to do this is give a brief overview, start with the bills that were enacted, then move to the bills that were considered but not chaptered, and then end with any acts that requested the Commission to write a report and present a study. The first subject I was going to start with is broadband internet, which you all have already talked about a little bit, and our expert has given a little brief overview on it. This was the subject of the Commission's January 2017 report, Broadband Internet Deployment, Availability, and Adoption in Tennessee. So there were multiple bills introduced this session that dealt with broadband, 2 of which were passed and have been enacted. One of those 2 that passed is Public Chapter 228, Acts of 2017, which drew heavily on the Commission's report. Consistent with several recommendations in this report, the Act focuses on supporting and coordinating existing initiatives and addressing any remaining coverage gaps by working with the private sector, both for-profit and not-for-profit, to fill remaining gaps in a manner least costly to the taxpayers and without expanding the role of the government. So, as recommended in that report, the Act does many things. I'm going to list off the major ones. It creates a state grant program for encouraging the deployment of broadband internet access in unserved and underserved areas by providing competitive grants to broadband providers. It establishes a credit against franchise and excise taxes for providers that expand coverage in unserved and underserved areas. It establishes a program to designate communities that adopt a checklist of permitting and zoning procedures as broadband-ready communities, which will then signal providers that they have removed regulatory barriers to broadband investment. It authorizes electric cooperatives to provide broadband service inside their electric service area so long as the electric ratepayer revenue is not used to subsidize the cost of this service. And this act also authorizes the state's new grant program to be used to provide libraries with grants for digital literacy training and other services. The next piece of legislation that passed, which is in response to the same topic and the same report, is Senate Bill 1363 by Bailey and House Bill 1367 by Sargent, and this bill had not been chaptered yet. What this bill does is change the classification of property of certain local telephone companies and telephone cooperatives from public utility to industrial and commercial property, and thus reduces the tax rate on these forms of providers. The Commission report discussed this but did not recommend it for various reasons, including concern that it was not targeted at areas that are unserved or underserved, and concern that local governments would lose money if not held harmless. So the legislation that passed addressed the second concern by requiring that local governments will be held harmless. There were 5 other bills that related to broadband that were considered but did not pass. And rather than go through all these, they're behind tab 4 in your 3-ring binder. Okay, so the next subject I discuss is protecting the interests of homeowners. Senate Bill 1089 by Ketron and House Bill 1199 by Rudd passed and has been signed by the governor, but again, we don't have the chapter number yet. This act follows the guidance in the January 2015 Commission report, protecting the interest of homeowners in planned developments, ensuring and maintaining common property, completing infrastructure, and providing fair and adequate regulation. This 2015 report suggests that any prohibition against homeowner associations banning political signs in certain circumstances should not be subject to local government control. The next subject is annexation and growth planning. The 110th General Assembly considered 2 bills related to topics addressed by the Commission's January 2015 report, Municipal Boundaries in Tennessee, Annexation and Growth Planning Policies after Public Chapter 707. So Senate Bill 568 by Johnson and House Bill 552 by Carr passed and has been signed by the governor, but has not been chaptered yet either. So this act makes applicable statewide instead of only in certain counties, Tennessee Code annotated section 651-104, which authorizes annexation of non-contiguous territory by referendum or consent of all affected landowners. This law, section 651-104, was based on suggestions in the Commission's January 2015 report, which said that allowing non-contiguous annexation in Tennessee would help cities and counties alleviate the problems created by corridor annexation. One other bill related to annexation was considered but has not yet passed by both chapters. Senate Bill 641 by Watson and House Bill 943 by Carter addressed de-annexation of an area annexed by a municipality, a topic discussed in the same Commission January 2015 report. This bill, as filed, would permit voters residing within an area annexed by a municipality to petition the County Election Commission to hold an election to de-annex such territory, specify that taxes may continue to be levied on a de-annexed area, and prohibit the discontinuation of utility services outside the municipal boundaries for reasons related to de-annexation. The Senate version, which passed, had several amendments, including those requiring that the referendum for de-annexation be held citywide, and that cities that have already begun developing a de-annexation plan of their own should be exempted. The House version was sent to the Local Government Subcommittee in February, and no further action has been taken on that bill. So now I move on to the professional privilege tax, which is the topic discussed in the Commission's December 2016 report, Professional Privilege Tax in Tennessee, Taxing Professionals Fairly. This was the subject of 3 bills introduced this session, none of which have passed yet. Senate Bill 132 by Bowling and House Bill 60 by Rogers would phase out the professional privilege tax over a 5-year period. The report studied various alternatives for eliminating or phasing out the professional privilege tax. Senate Bill 1274 by Norris and House Bill 1041 by Gant would allow certain professionals that are currently required to pay both the professional privilege tax and the franchise and excise tax to receive a credit for one of these taxes against the other, and this is also discussed in the report. This bill has been taken off notice in the Senate Finance Ways and Means Committee. And one more bill on this is Senate Bill 546 by Ketron and House Bill 60 by Rogers, which would allow a person that is responsible for the professional privilege tax to receive a 75% rebate on it if they meet certain requirements, such as older than the age for full Social Security benefits and earn no more than $16,000 per year from that taxable occupation. And the report studies varied exemptions that might, various professions that should be exempted. The next subject is court fees and taxes. This is the subject of the Commission's January 2017 report, Tennessee Court Fees and Taxes, Funding the Courts Fairly. Senate Bill 1084 by Lundberg and House Bill 880 by Daniel makes a recommendation consistent with this report. It would create a court fee and advisory council to make recommendations concerning pending legislation, proposing any new litigation, tax, or fee on civil or criminal cases to the members of the General Assembly. The Senate deferred the bill to summer study, and the House Civil Justice Subcommittee deferred it to the next legislative session. The next topic I have is county fees for firehouse construction and maintenance. Senate Bill 1257 by Norris and House Bill 488 by Lawler, which passed both chambers but has not yet been transmitted to the governor. This allows cities incorporated under the General Law City Manager Commission Charter to charge a fee to raise revenue to fund municipal fire stations, subject to approval by a 2/3 vote of the Board of Commissioners. This is consistent with a recommendation in the Commission's June 2013 report, Fire Service in Tennessee. And the last thing I have to mention is the acts that require the Commission to do new studies. The General Assembly passed 3 pieces of legislation requiring the Commission to do new studies. Public Chapter 179, Acts of 2017, directs the Commission to perform a study of the creation and implementation of a system for the titling of the boats in Tennessee. No due date for that project was given. Senate Bill 1362 by Bailey and House Bill 1223 by Hicks passed and has been signed by the governor but has not been chaptered. This act directs the Commission to study the economic benefits to counties and municipalities from the use of payments in lieu of ad valorem tax, agreements, and leases by industrial development corporations, and limitations on these agreements and leases. And that report is due February 1st, 2018. And then lastly, Public Chapter 228, Acts of 2017, directs the Commission to prepare an update of its January 2017 report, Broadband Internet Deployment, Availability, and Adoption in Tennessee, and that's due January 15th, 2021. And that's the conclusion of my legislative update.
Thank you, Mr. Kupitz. In the Senate, we have something called the Greenhorn Caucus, where first-term members have to perform a skit. And in a way, I've been talking with Dr. Lippard, throwing you into this briar patch to ask you to report on the legislative session about which you knew nothing and probably were unaware that most of the sponsors you mentioned are sitting here grumbling about what became of their bills.
And I hope I pronounced their names correctly.
You did. Ketron is a little bit of a forced, Ketron works, but a lot of people, I think Chairman Watson calls him Ketron. Ketron. But he's not here to benefit from the abuse. But no, seriously, thank you. The one that jumps out at me as with a pretty short fuse, Senate Bill 1362 and House Bill 1223, which I think may have been signed by the governor just yesterday.
Okay.
That is a big topic. I mean,
Which one is that?
and it's a hot topic and sometimes a hot button. Looking at pilots and I'm frequently asked by constituents. I bet I've been seriously been asked twice in the last 10 days by constituents, just what in the heck's going on. They think we have pilots. We have tax incentives and the like, but that's top of mind with a lot of folks, and it's a lot of work. I sort of wrestled with it when I was a county commissioner in Shelby County, and it takes more than a couple of months. But February 1, Dr. Lippard, are you comfortable with that? I mean, it is what it is, and that's the law. But how do you think you'll be able to meet that?
Actually, Chairman, Melissa Brown's going to go over our work program amendment here in just a minute, and you'll see when she goes through that, we have a fairly aggressive research plan to meet that February 1st date, but I'm confident we can meet it.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Senate Bill 1257 by Norris, a question. Charging a fee to raise revenue to fund municipal fire stations. How do you go about raising this revenue?
So it applies to city manager forms of government only, and if by referendum they determine to adopt this in their municipality, for those that are eligible, they assess it in lieu of the county's fire fee. In other words, in Shelby County, we pay a fire fee in unincorporated Shelby County and some of the municipalities, and this would, in essence, replace that. And the theory is, at least by the one city that brought this to me, is that they can provide the services for about $800,000 a year more cheaply than the county could have. So if I remember correctly, the fee is charged on our utility bill there. And I don't know if that's responsible.
That explains it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Welcome aboard. Other questions? Well done. Congratulations. Thank you. But I think you can see that a number of important bills do emanate from work that TACIR does or has done in years past. And again, it's to all of your credit. Then we move on without more to tab 5, which is a good segue here, the work program, what changes we need to address work that's been assigned to us. And Deputy Director Brown, you're recognized for that. Do we have any tough ones this year? I mean, the ones that pass and tell us to do it, we do. Do we have some split decisions? Do we have to wrestle with the... Oh, good. This is easy.
It's going to take 10 minutes to get...
But this will require a vote, so...
Yes.
Thank you. You're recognized.
Okay. Had to jump to get the microphone. How's this? Okay. Rachel did a great job discussing the legislation that's passed that requires studies of the commission over the next year and into 2021. So we're looking at tab 5 because now we need to amend the work program. So let me tell you how this is set up. The first, I'm going to go over the status of existing work program projects in just a minute. On the back of the memo on page 2 is a description of the 3 bills that really Rachel has already given you, directing the commission to do various studies. Behind that, for the 3 potential studies, the one on boat titling, the one on pilots, and then the future broadband study, there is a draft research plan that is set up according to our 8-step process that we've been using for years. And Cliff mentioned, there was some discussion about the complexity of the pilots. So there's a research plan laid out there, and I'll just call your attention to the staff that's already assigned to that. That has Senior Research Manager Leah Eldridge as the manager on that. She's got a lot of experience with this type of work. Also Tyler Carpenter and, of course, Michael Mount, who is becoming our new tax expert in the office. He's assigned to work with that as well. And as we have other projects, and Cliff, please correct me if I'm wrong, but as we finish some of our existing projects, that will free up some staff to move on to this project because we do anticipate a lot of work on this one. So for each of the projects, we have a draft research plan and a draft timeline for completion. I will point out that the information for the broadband project, because that's forward-looking, is not exactly in the same research plan format. We've got a couple of years, although we've written out sort of a plan of action for the next couple of years to show the steps we'll need to be taking along the way to meet that deadline. So back to the status of existing work program projects. First is the already in our work program is the annual public infrastructure needs report. Now this is going to be presented this afternoon by Senior Research Associate Dave Kaiser. And keeping in mind that as Dave has put this report together and created this new dashboard for you to look at this afternoon, he's already gathering and checking survey data for next year. So it's always like a dual process on this one. There's always something going on. Next is the funding for Emergency 911 Services report that was required by Public Chapter 795, Acts of 2014. Now, this is due September 2017. Tomorrow, you will hear the draft report for your review and comment, and then the final report at our fall 2017 meeting, hopefully for your approval. Next is state prisoners in county jails. This was a study requested by commission members at the May 2016 meeting. We have a draft report for your review and comment tomorrow, and a final report to be prepared for our fall 2017 meeting. Next is Tennessee Valley Authority Payment in Lieu of Taxes Annual Report. Now, we'll present this, the annual update, for your approval at the January 2018 meeting so that we can meet the legislature's reporting deadline of February 28th, 2018. And finally, the Fiscal Capacity Index. Now, we've already submitted this year's index to the State Department of Education and the State Board of Education. And Michael Mount is going to be providing an update of this year's results this afternoon. And then the next index is due May 1st, 2018. So this year we just have one amendment that encompasses the 3 acts. Of course, as Rachel mentioned, one hasn't been chaptered yet. The 3 studies for consideration by the Commission to add to the work program.
I'll entertain a motion that we amend. So moved by Speaker Pro Tem Tracy and seconded by Senator Yarborough. Is there discussion on these items? Any comment on capacity? Dr. Lippert, do you want to, just for the record, comment on the staffing and adequacy and availability?
Actually, with the new staff that I introduced earlier today, I think we're in a good position to perform all these tasks. And as Melissa correctly mentioned, as we complete the 911 project and other large projects, we'll be able to roll some of those staff over to assist on these projects. We actually, if anything, have a little bit, I'm a little scared to say this, a little bit of excess capacity right now, even with this large project.
All right, I think it's good to know, because we've worked through several years where we were all jammed up, and one of the reasons was we never previously didn't have clear guidance on what could and could not come to TACIR, or if it came, how it came. And I think what you're seeing here is the results of the changes we made with sort of a protocol on what would and wouldn't be accepted, so that what the General Assembly did this year was what we preferred, and that is to pass legislation by both, adopt legislation passed by both houses that directs TACIR to do things, rather than sort of the one-off, one chamber or one committee saying, well, we'll just send it to TACIR for summer study, when that isn't really what was intended or appropriate. So good. This is good. There's a motion before us. Is there further discussion on it? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there any opposition or abstentions? Hearing none. That passes unanimously. The plan is duly adopted as amended. Thank you. Good job. All right, so we're prepared to move on then to tab 6, the annual report on Tennessee's public infrastructure needs, final report for approval. This will also require your vote. And Dave, Mr. Kaiser will present with his new 5-year certificate.
Adjust the microphone again.
You make the adjustments. We'll have some materials passed out here. And I think the I word, infrastructure, has taken on ever more significance with the passage of the Tax Reduction Act of 2017, aka IMPROVE. Infrastructure sort of top of mind once again as the federal government may begin to embark into this arena and what may or may not come to pass. All right, we think we got the materials, and Mr. Kaiser, you're recognized.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. Today I will be presenting a brief overview of the information on the Public Infrastructure Needs Inventory, along with an explanation of the new county summaries. A hard copy of the draft report has been provided for your approval under tab 6. Before I begin, I'd like to show you one of the new county summaries. Let's take a look at Montgomery County on the projector. Here you can see the total estimated cost for their infrastructure needs. We got $1.2 billion in Montgomery County. Here you can see directly to the right is a breakdown of the July 1st, 2015 needs separated by stage of development. Based on feedback received from commission members at the August commission meeting, we separated the estimated costs of conceptual needs from the cost of projects that are either in construction or planning and design. The top 3 based on that chart are then analyzed back to 2007 and separated out by whether the need is considered a local need or a regional need. We have included the estimated cost of completions here as well, so you can see how much is being done. And lastly, we included a chart comparing the trends of student enrollment to the cost of infrastructure for new school space and the cost for improving existing space. Are there any questions or comments or feedback that you guys would like to?
Yeah, let's take a moment to absorb this, if we may. That Chairman Sargent, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Especially when we're looking at transportation. I know this is as of 15. Last year, 16-17 budget, we gave $42 million to local governments, strictly to the counties, not to the cities, just to the counties. Yep. This year, we're giving them $55 million. State aid money, again, just to the counties. When I'm looking at roads, how much is that going to change? Because if I'm just looking, I'm looking at $97 million. Is that just a 0.2%, 0.3%, or 5%?
$90 million? Yeah, it'd be about it'd be a small percentage of the overall total. We have about $24 billion in transportation needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering how much that was going to change these numbers on any given county or anything on that nature. So you're saying it's going to be a very small percentage. Okay. Thank you.
I assume so. Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. Now for the report, starting on page 9 under tab 6. So public infrastructure is needed in every corner of the state, from highly populated counties like Shelby and Davidson to rural counties like Humphreys and Pickett. In general, it has been the case throughout the history of this inventory that the more people a county has and the more its population grows, the more infrastructure will need. However, relative to their populations, counties with small populations need just as much or more infrastructure than counties with large populations. The current report is the 15th prepared since inventory began in the late 1990s.
Excuse me, sir. Speaker Tracy.
I just want him to repeat that one more time, because we didn't hear that much during the discussion of this past session, what you said about the rural counties versus the metropolitan area. Just what you just said, that comment you just said about the rural areas. Would you repeat that one more time?
Yes. Relative to populations, when we do infrastructure needs per capita, counties with small populations need just as much or more infrastructure than counties with large populations. A road costs just as much in a rural county as it does in a large urban county. Same with water and sewer.
Go ahead.
All right, the information in this report is based on the 5-year period of July 2015 through June 2020, and the total estimated cost of the needs reported in this period is $43.4 billion. This is a $3 billion increase since the last inventory. Improvements needed for infrastructure supporting transportation and utilities, education, and health, safety, and welfare categories continue to account for most of the inventory, with changes in the total estimated cost of education, health, safety, and welfare categories being responsible for most of the reported increase in this year's report. As in last year's inventory, nearly 2/3 of the estimated cost of needed improvements reported in this year's inventory is not funded, though more funding will become available as projects move from the conceptual stage to the planning and design stage. Table 1 on page 10 compares the current estimated cost to the previous inventory report. Of the $3 billion increase in infrastructure needs reported in this year's inventory, more than $2.4 billion, or 81.3%, is attributable to increases in the total estimated cost for education and health, safety, and welfare infrastructure needs. For the second straight year, needed improvements for health, safety, and welfare show the largest overall increase, $1.3 billion, most of which results from $1 billion increase reported for water and wastewater projects, including the addition of some large projects in Shelby and Knox counties. Education infrastructure needs increased $1.2 billion from last year's inventory, with $636 million of the increase reported for new schools and additions to existing schools. Increases in needs reported for other categories in the inventory also included recreation and culture with $220 million, general government with $182 million, transportation utilities with $130 million, and economic development with just $31 million. These are all relatively small in comparison. I'll now drill down on a couple types of infrastructure that caught our attention this year. Transportation needs remain relatively flat. The net increase in total estimated cost of transportation needs is only $27 million in this year's report. That doesn't mean nothing happened in the transportation infrastructure community. This net increase included $2.4 billion in new projects, $774 million in project cost increases. These increases were partially offset by $1.2 billion in completed projects, $478 million worth of canceled projects, and $102 million for postponed projects no longer considered in this 5-year analysis window. Projects totaling $755 million were removed from the inventory because of improved methods of project tracking and quality control used to identify duplicates and invalid information. Moreover, state and local officials reported $620 million in reduced costs for projects already in the inventory. As you can see, quite a bit happened. The estimated cost of a project can change for many reasons, including not only the cost of materials and labor, but also specific government initiatives like TDOT's Expedited Project Delivery Program. Other utilities, including infrastructure needed to support broadband internet, accounts for most of the increase in the transportation and utilities category. Needs reported for other utilities increased by $103 million in this year's inventory and now totals $316 million. Most of this increase is attributable to the addition of a $69 million electrical grid modernization project by Knoxville Utilities Board. And in light of the recommendations in the Commission's recently published report, Broadband Internet Deployment, Availability, and Adoption in Tennessee, public infrastructure needed for broadband has also been added to the inventory as its own project type within the transportation and utilities category, which will be reflected in next year's report. Nevertheless, broadband internet needs have already been collected. As of July 2015, there are 2 broadband projects in the inventory. Gibson County reports a $5 million project, and McMinn County reports a $7 million project. We expect to see more broadband projects moving forward. Enrollment growth and the rising cost of construction materials appear to be driving the increase in the estimated cost of education infrastructure improvements. To meet the needs caused by enrollment growth and aging facilities, school systems can build new schools in extra capacity, build additions onto existing schools, renovate existing spaces, or use portable classrooms. In this inventory, the $488 million increase in the need for new schools was the main reason that total estimated cost for education infrastructure increased. This year, local officials reported they need $1.9 billion to build new schools, of which $639 million for school projects reported for the first time by 14 school systems. Almost half of all school systems reported a need for new schools have growing enrollment. You can see table 2 on page 14. The total estimated cost for school additions increased $148 million and now totals $529 million, while the cost for improvements to existing spaces increased $256 million and now totals $2.2 billion. See Table 3 on page 15 for that. Some of the additions and improvements to existing spaces are caused by the condition of the school. Although just over 8.1% of public schools in Tennessee were rated by their local school officials in fair or poor condition, most of those schools need improvements to existing space and account for nearly a third of the total estimated existing space needs. You can see figure 3 and table 4 on page 15. Another reason for the increase in the cost of needed education infrastructure could be the rising costs of construction materials and labor. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics' new school construction price index rose 18 points, or 13.8%, from 2010 to 2015. And RS Means data by Gordian, an industry-leading construction cost estimating company, shows growth in square foot costs for schools increasing in a similar manner. In 2010, the average cost of a completed new school in this inventory was $16 million. 6 schools were completed in last year's report and averaged $21 million. Over the next 5 years, local officials report needing 77 more schools at an average cost of $25 million. The need for clean water and housing account for most of the increase in the health, safety, and welfare category. Tennessee's water and wastewater infrastructure is aging. Some water and sewer mains are now over a century old. And as the state's population grows, especially around our major cities of Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, and Chattanooga, additional capacity is needed. In this year's inventory, the estimated cost of needed water and wastewater infrastructure increased $1 billion and now totals $4.3 billion. This increase is mainly caused by the addition of large projects in Shelby and Knox counties. The other primary cause of the increase in health, safety, and welfare needs in this year's report is a large increase in the estimated cost of housing infrastructure. An improved survey approach identified needs for public housing infrastructure not captured in past reports. Last year's report only had 3 projects, and all of those have since been completed. This year, 49 projects are newly identified in the inventory, and estimated cost totals $304 million. The largest project is the $167 million South City housing project in Memphis. The average cost for the other 48 is $2.9 million apiece. Nearly 2/3 of the estimated cost of the needed improvements reported in this year's inventory is not funded. Information about funding for public infrastructure needs reported by officials indicates that 64.6% of the funds required to meet those needs was not available at the time the inventory was conducted, nearly the same as last year's percentage. Excluding improvements needed at existing schools and those drawn from capital budget requests submitted by state agencies, neither of which include funding information, only $12.5 billion in funding is available for the remaining $33.9 billion in needs. You can look at Table 5 on page 15. The information provided is a brief overview of the needs reported in the current inventory report. If you want to see how your county is performing, please take a look at Appendix D at the back of Tab 6 for county specifics for project types and stage of development. Appendix E is also included and has information related to school districts. The new county summaries start on page 21. I would like to also update you on the current status of the next inventory report. The July 2016 inventory is in the final stages of review by TACIR staff. I would like to thank everybody at the development districts for helping me gather the information for this report, and all of my coworkers at TACIR for getting the report out. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. If not, then I ask for the approval of the July 2015 infrastructure report.
Was that a motion or a recognition? Commissioner McMahon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. I move to accept this report.
All right. Been properly moved and seconded. Discussion. One question, Mr. Kaiser, and that is this accessible online, like all reports? Is the dashboard accessible? Do we have anything similar to what Michael Mount had presented in terms of click on counties or what have you? Have we done this?
Not at this present moment. We're still working on it.
Well, all right. Melissa's sort of nodding yes, and you're sort of saying no. But the point is that it will be accessible just as the fiscal federalism is, or I'll yield to Dr. Lippard, I presume.
The county profiles are included in the report online, so it's just a matter of paging through the
Okay.
report, but not in a click-through
Okay.
format like they came out. Though that is something we would like to do long-term.
Well, but Chairman Watson may have some heartburn about that. But it's something to keep in mind. But it is online. It is accessible. The dashboards are there in the old-fashioned way. Okay. Yes, Mayor Waters, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think the infrastructure report is a good thing, and the staff does a good job, and the development district does, and I support it. I have a concern about some of the figures in that, and this doesn't happen everywhere, but I think some places it becomes a wish list of what some official at some point thinks they want, and I don't know how to solve that. Maybe if there was a process that it had to go through a governmental entity at the local level before it was recommended, it would cause a little bit more discretion by some of these folks, but that would take a long time, and I recognize that, and I don't know how to solve it, but I just have that concern. I think we need an infrastructure report, but some of these numbers, I'm not sure. I know in our county they put a lot of thought in it, I think, but some of them maybe just sit down and list a bunch of projects out there and don't put a lot of thought in it and then put it in this report. So that's a concern, and I don't know how to address it, but we'd like to see this infrastructure report be as accurate as possible on the needs of a community instead of a wish list that somebody's made of what we wish we could have. An actual infrastructure report on the needs, and that's just a concern that I have.
And Chairman Sargent seeking recognition, but as I segue to Chairman Sargent, I would say it might be interesting for us to consider sending a letter back at random or otherwise to some of the locals and say, we have your information in the annual infrastructure report, which we've approved, but we have some questions about it so that they know there is a certain level of accountability. I mean, that we are actually paying attention and the like. But Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you. I was going to look at the school enrollment. Do you also work on the next tab we're going to do is fiscal capacity of schools? Do you also work on that?
Me personally?
Correct.
No, I do not.
Because what we never talk about, the fast-growing counties are building buildings like crazy. Williams County will build 2 or 3 new schools a year. I mean, we're projecting in the next 5 years we'll grow 10,000 students. Why, you have the numbers, why under the fiscal capacity of schools do we not take in bonding conditions and what they're spending on bricks and mortar that the state does not pay? Do I need to ask the next person that? So I'm giving them a heads up to answer that question when we get to that. Because bricks and mortar are becoming more and more expensive as we go, especially if you're going to grow 10,000 students. Yeah. You're looking at a number of schools, 3 or 4 or 5 elementary schools, a couple of middle schools in the high school, or 2 high schools. Yeah. And that becomes very expensive. And it's not considered in the fiscal capacity, which I think we need to start looking at it to that be part of that formula. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I will plead ignorance here as the newer member to TACIR. So would you tell me how you ascertain your data, how you get to this data?
Of course. So we get data from TDOT. We get all of their projects that they have in their management database. We also get a list of all their bridges. There's about 20,000 bridges across the state. And if there is an estimated cost and scope of work for remedying a bridge to get it to a sufficiency rating, we include that cost. Most of the bridges that we have in our database are in the conceptual stage. That's why they weren't in the backlog, the governor's backlog. So we have TDOT's projects, we have their bridges, and if it's a state-owned bridge and it moves beyond the conceptual stage, then TDOT will assign a project number to it, and then we get the data from the project database. So that's how we get the TDOT information. And then we send that out to our development district surveyors for verification, trying to figure out what's going on with this project. So if we don't get any information about the project, they can call the locals and find out what's going on. The second batch of data that we get is from the local level. These are the development district surveyors. When they're out meeting with county and city officials, after they're finished going over the TDOT projects, they then ask about, do you have any other local needs? This is where we pick up the parks and the greenways and the water and wastewater. They survey utility districts. The third is the capital budget requests that we get from the state agencies before they go through the budget process. And when we're done with those, we send them back to the agencies every year for verification and updates on the status of those projects. And then the last set is the school information. The school information we treat with a separate survey form. We deal with the Department of Education to verify the schools. We only include school buildings that are owned by public governments. They're not privately owned buildings that are leased out, or like charters seem to fall into this. The charter schools move around quite a bit. And then we survey school officials with the development district's assistance to find out what they need. We also ask about the school condition and the number of classrooms that they have.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And how do we know about the reliability or the validity of your data? I mean, I get the TDOT. That's fairly well. You have a way of checking that fairly well for reliability and validity. But how do you analyze the validity and the reliability of the other data? We do a lot of analysis looking at past years and current years, and to weed out duplications. That's one of the big things that I do. We also have a list of definitions for project types. We don't include maintenance or repairs, so that's one thing that I'm looking for. Sometimes those sneak in, we have to take them out. And then we have to rely on the local surveyors with their expertise and knowledge of the local area. At the end of the day, we have to rely on that.
And if I may interject, there was through this process of review and analysis, there was an area this year, for example, I think it was public housing.
Yes.
Where we actually found underreporting in several instances that had not been accounted for previously. Then this was the subject of some scrutiny by the Comptroller's office. They focused on the infrastructure report, questioning the utility of it. And our conclusion was, and we defended the utility of it, because however inadequate it may be in certain categories, it's usually consistently so. In other words, we're comparing apples to apples across the years. So I made an issue out of the report that I think it was it $40 billion back? That was a much higher figure that TACIR had for transportation than the Department of Transportation had for transportation.
Yeah, we have a nice sidebar on page 11 that walks you through the backlog.
And the point I'm making as we turn to that is that it is not perfect, but at least it's consistently imperfect to the extent it's not perfect. And it is a tool that I used this to club Governor Bredesen over the head when he was diverting transportation dollars those many years ago. And that was a big deal the last couple of years here because we repaid the fund that was diverted. But at the time, I'm starting to tell war stories now, I shouldn't do that. But until Bill Harmon came along in the House and chaired transportation on the House side, I was just whistling in the dark on the Senate side. All of our troops were willing to stop that diversion and restore that funding. Tracy succeeded me as chairman of transportation, and he's seeking recognition. But you may want to comment on this a little bit. But I used this report. It's the only thing I had to wave around with me at the time. Chairman Tracy, Speaker Tracy.
Well, I think it was 2009 when we passed legislation to basically put it in statute that you can't take money out of the transportation fund and divert it to the general fund. And then, of course, this past 2 years now, we've repaid that $280 million over the past 2 years, this year's budget and last year's budget. So it is fully repaid now. And now we move forward with that. So you're telling war stories is correct. I just got to make sure you get your dates right. You know?
Well, when I chaired the committee in 2005 to 2007, Tracy took it in 2007. But those were the years where, and I wasn't, very popular with the administration. But however accurate the figures were, I was able to use this report to say, by golly, we've got needs that are being unmet. How dare you divert the revenues to general fund when we have infrastructure needs, transportation needs here. So, yes, Representative Love, I'm sorry, you've been waiting patiently. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No need. I'm all right. I want to ask you a question about the schools, and I'm looking at the appendix, and I see that there are a good number of schools, districts that have schools in the poor category. My concern is that we apparently still have students in schools that are ranked as being in poor condition, which probably ranges from anything, maybe the HVAC unit's not running properly, or there's some ceilings that need to be repaired, something along that matter. Here's my question and concern. Reading through the report, it was alluded to that we fund enough in the BEP funding formula to provide for the repair of these buildings. And I guess my question would be, are we actually funding enough in the BEP funding formula to take care of the repair, upgrade of these buildings?
Boy, I wish I knew the answer to that question.
The peanut gallery here, Mayor Burgess, and then,
I was thinking about sort of following up what Chairman Sargent said there, but don't get us going on the BEP formula. There is no capital that flows from the BEP formula to our county school systems or any school system for that matter. It's amazing. So I just wanted this group here, this is not right for this discussion, but you are in influential positions, many of you. Rutherford County is $30 million a year, and that's going up every year just for capital, just for our debt service-owned schools. There are 2 or 3 other components in the BEP formula, but I wish some of you guys would, in the legislature, would get a really study organized and put forth here. Rutherford County cannot sustain the growth that we're going to have for the next 15 to 20 years and pay for schools and operate those. It's right now, there's $100 million that we're having to pay out of local funds for teachers' salaries, numbers of teachers, and capital costs. That's not coming from the BEP formula.
I think Chairman Sargent.
I just like to follow up because Rutherford County, Williamson County, Montgomery County, they are some of the fastest growing school districts in the state. And the mayor said there were none. They're probably 1/10 of 1%. I won't say there's none, but it's next to none when we're coming. And what I was originally asked the question is about 7%. If you look at our total budget, 7% is paying for new school buildings. And that is not figured in the capacity. It's not figured in any school formula whatsoever. And at some point in time, we're going to have to figure that in because those fast-growing counties, their capital outlay note, like I said, I know we're over $500 million just on buildings in Williamson County, and they're saying it's going to cost them about another $400 to $600 million over the next 10 years. So, I mean, this is what's going to happen if we're not careful. You're going to see even counties that you can say, okay, you're wealthy, you can do all this stuff, but they're not going to be able to afford the capital outlay note on school buildings growing the way they are.
Thank you, Mr.
Vice
Chairman.
Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to comment on the accuracy of one political subdivision I'm familiar with. In Cleveland-Bradley County, you're almost to the penny on school needs for 2 schools that are getting ready to be built. So thank you for that accuracy.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Representative Love, we may have interjected.
All right. Well, I just wanted to, glad I brought the question up because I think it's important we talk about the expense of building schools. And as counties do grow, even in Nashville, we have some growth occurring. And I don't want us to have a situation where in Nashville we run out of space for new school buildings and have to deal with that increased cost. So I just want to raise that point that as we talk about BEP funding formula, we talk about school buildings, we talk about the grading of schools from excellent to fair to good. We certainly don't want our kids going to school in a poor school building because we're not funding them on the state level. You know, we are considering that fact because kids need an environment in which they can learn. And if there's inadequate heating or cooling going on, you can't just keep putting portables out there and talking about we're going to take care of our kids. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to bring that point up as we look at the rating and grading of our school buildings across the state.
Representative Love, what would you and the other members think if on our August agenda we had a presentation by some of the school boards or others in education on the subject to hear their perspective? Would that be beneficial, you think? All right, if there's no objection, then I'll ask Dr. Lippard to sort of work that into our program of work for the August meeting. Good. Other questions? Anything else to present?
Nope.
We have to vote on this, don't we?
Yes.
Is there a motion? Been properly moved by Representative Love. Is there a second? All right, seconded by Charlie Caldwell and others. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Once again, unanimously approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion. We'll move on then to the final work for today behind tab 7. I have some materials presented here, and then Michael Mount to address us. See, you had a lot of seeds planted there.
Yeah, thank you for hammering my predecessor rather than me, but I can try to address some of those same questions if you'd like.
Thank you. Proceed.
One thing that came to mind here in the discussion was that, and that I should emphasize, is that in the BEP there is a capital component, but the school systems are not required to spend that on capital expenses. They can spend it on operational expenses.
There we go, Chairman Sargent, you're recognized.
I agree with what you just said, but tell me what the percentage is. You said that in our BEP formula, there is money set aside to fund capital improvements. Can you tell me what percentage in the BEP formula is set aside to do capital improvements?
I would have to look that up.
Would you say 0.5%?
To do, no, it would be more than that, but
1%? Excuse me, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot, but I would like to see that, because when we make statements like that, I think we're misleading that it's such a small percentage that I don't believe it's even 1%. So I just want to correct before we go too far down that line. And if so, I want to know what Williamson County gets.
my colleague is telling me that in the BP formula, $700 million is for capital expenses, and that is out of about $4.5 billion.
Okay, 4.5 billion. Correct?
4.5 billion.
Okay, you're saying 700 million goes to capital. Now, is that counting computers, desk, and everything on that nature, or are we talking bricks and mortar? There's a big difference when I look at capital, and I'm looking at desk, and I'm looking at computers and everything on that nature. I don't mean to.
We don't want Mr. Mount to tear up his 5-year certificate. We just had a photo. Melissa.
Okay, just to give you a little background, in a previous life, I actually ran the BEP funding formula for the Department of Education for about 7 years. And I will say I have not been there since 2002, but I kind of keep up with it for the work we do here. So the desk and things like that are separate from capital outlay. So there's a materials and supplies component that is separate than capital outlay is more like square footage, the bricks and mortar, and it falls under the non-classroom category. And as I think the point Michael was trying to make is there is a capital outlay component. It's not based, a lot of the components in the BEP are based on an average of the last 3 years of expenditures. That's not one in Tennessee that is based on actual expenditures. It's based on a Southeast average, and it's actually out of the report. Dave mentioned that RS means report that he mentioned for infrastructure. So that's one thing. They use a standardized Southeast cost rather than actual expenditures. But I think Michael's point was that money's there, but it can be used anywhere. It can be used for salaries. They have a lot of flexibility with where that money is used. It's not earmarked at all for capital outlay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Is that the 700 million, and I'm going to really have to see this number because I right off the top of my head, I don't believe that 18% of the BEP is for capital outlay, as far as that's concerned. That's awful high. But let me use that number of 18%. Is it done by the growth of the school district, or is it done by the BEP formula? A school that's not growing gets that money.
It's based on, all of the BEP is based on prior year average daily membership, their student count. So
Okay.
It usually lags, you're right, it usually lags about a year behind. So if you've got large growth this year, it's got to catch up, but there is a separate pot of money for growth that the department uses.
Okay, now let me, I want to ask a direct question. If I had a county that grew 0 students, or they lost students, would that county get any money on capital outlay?
Yes, because the BEP is recalculated every year.
So every year, if a school district grew none or had less students every year, they would get money on capital for bricks and mortar, even though they have not grown any students or they had less students.
Right, because it's just one of the, capital outlay is just one of the general components that's in the formula to generate funds.
Okay, I understand that. Let me use Sevier County, if I may, for an example. I don't want to use Williamson, and Mr. Waters probably will back me up. Under the BEP formula, they get, the average school gets about $4,500, $4,600 per student per year. Sevier gets $2,200 per student per year. And so they're well less than half, and they may be growing, and another school that's not growing gets part of that money where he's growing. So what you're saying, the BEP formula is totally out of whack. If I am paying someone 18% of their budget goes to bricks and mortar, and the school's not growing and haven't built the school, why am I giving them money then for bricks and mortar if we have such a good fiscal capacity?
I think it goes back to it's a funding formula, not a spending plan. So it's almost like a template for generating money for school systems.
But why am I spending formula if I haven't built a school? Why am I giving someone money for not building a school?
I think it goes back to the original intent of the BEP funding formula and local flexibility. So we're going to have a standard way we fund, but based on the local needs, you might need bricks and mortar, but I might need more textbooks. And so there's flexibility in that spending within the formula.
You told me it was bricks and mortar. It wasn't for textbooks. It wasn't for desks. It wasn't for anything else. You said it was for bricks and mortar.
No, I said there's a different component that generates money for those things, but none of the money is earmarked except for other parts of statute.
No. Okay, I'm going to yield, and I totally disagree, because he said that $700 million, not I, was spent on bricks and mortar.
Well, I think he said generated in the formula for capital outlay. Is that right?
Okay, tell me what capital outlay is then, if it's not bricks and mortar. It can't be hiring a teacher. That's not capital outlay.
They have flexibility to move that money by statute.
In other words, I think what she's saying, Mr. Chairman, and boy, I'm not going to argue with the chairman of the House Finance Committee because I know where at least one side of my bread gets buttered. But what she's saying is an allocation. It's not an appropriation. It goes into the formula, and yet there's no restriction on how they spend it. But let me recognize Speaker Pro Tem Tracy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Sargent, you make a good point. My years on school board, I think that money is allocated, or it says capital projects, but that no one is particularly checking to see if it's spent for capital projects. Right. It may be a percentage that goes for capital project, but it could be used for teacher salaries. It could be used for computers. It could be used for whatever. Now, Mr. Chairman, along that line, since we got, Chairman Sargent woke up over here and got it, got a little motivated, why don't we next meeting, we bring in not only, I think somebody would be good, maybe from Williamson County, Rutherford County, the finance person that does the finances for a local, LEA. And they'll explain to you how it goes. But if I remember right on the BP formula, just because there's money allocated for capital projects, no one's really checking to see if they put back a percentage of that money for brick and mortar. They may use it for additional teachers for whatever they want to do, if I remember right, Mr. Chairman. And I think that's where we're getting.
Chairman Sargent, to close.
Just one short question, because I think he'll enjoy what I'm saying. We spent how many hours this year in the House and Senate talking about certified PE teachers? Yeah. Okay? And that's all I'll say.
Inside baseball. Inside baseball. Balls and strikes. You're out. Well, Michael, how is it over there?
I'm doing all right.
Please continue.
I'll get going here. I wanted to clarify one thing. The $4.5 billion is the number that came to my mind first, but it's the state's share and not the total BEP cost. But the $700 million was the total capital component of the BEP. So just if that clarifies it at all, I don't know.
Next item.
Okay.
Move on.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Michael Mount, and I'll be. I'll be giving the annual update on fiscal capacity, found on tab 7. Before I begin, I'll give a summary of the BEP beyond what's already given.
I think we've had that. I think we've had that. Could you move on to the next section of your report?
Okay. I'll just mention quickly that TACIR is 50% of the fiscal capacity that we calculate. CBER is the other 50%. But I can skip that.
Mayor Waters.
In defense of TACIR, if you think this formula is bad, you ought to see the CBER formula.
Right.
I mean, it is something else. So,
and
the TACIR formula stands high above the CBER.
It's not the work of the mad scientist, as it was referred to some time ago. But for those listening in or the uninitiated, there also was a recent task force, a study that restudied BEP and came up with a recommendation such as it was, and we acted on that for the first time in the 109th General Assembly. This year, some are fond of saying that we fully funded the BEP, but you don't want to go there because it invites all these questions, although we did appropriate a considerable sum to quote-unquote fully fund the BEP in the next year's budget that begins July 1. But we'll hear more about it, I think, in the August meeting. Thank you. Mr. Mount?
Fiscal capacity, it answers the question, how much must each local government contribute to the BEP? It measures the potential ability of local governments to fund education from their own sources relative to their cost of providing services. And both TACIR and CBER use a county-level model. In other words, for counties that have more than one school system, they will be considered to have the same fiscal capacity. The method that we use for the TACIR model is multiple regression analysis, and it's used to determine the weights of the 5 factors that are used in the model. And I'll discuss those factors in the next couple slides. The weights are then multiplied back through the county's actual values for those factors to determine its fiscal capacity. These are the factors that are used in that regression. Revenue per student, and then the tax basis, sales tax, and property tax assessment per student. Next is the equalized residential and farm assessment divided by the total assessment. And this factor is used as a proxy to measure the county's ability to export its tax burden to people outside the county. In other words, counties with more commercial and industrial base are, people are coming into that county and buying things at retail and also purchasing industrial products that they're exporting from the county, and so bearing part of the tax burden of that county. Next is per capita income, and finally the ADM divided by population or service burden. And to address the question that was raised last year, the service burden, if even in a county where the student growth is growing rapidly, the service burden factor may not change if the population and the student population are growing proportionally. In other words, if the student population, public school student population, is growing faster than the population, then the service burden would increase, and vice versa. If the population is growing faster than the public school student population, it would decrease. And here are the effects of the 5 factors on fiscal capacity. Of course, the tax bases and income would increase a county's capacity, whereas more residential farm as a percentage of the property decreases it, and also increased service burden decreases fiscal capacity. And I will point out and go over on the next few slides revisions made by the Bureau of Economic Analysis to their per capita income measure. The Bureau of Economic Analysis produces annually a measure of per capita income, and this year they revised that measure by making a change to 9-digit zip codes in place of 5-digit zip codes. And this is important because the 5-digit zip codes can cross county lines and the 9-digit zip codes do not. And so prior to the change, it was possible that income earned in a zip code would be assigned to only one county, and so some of the income from one county would be assigned to another. But that has been fixed in this revision. The size of this revision is rather large, averaging $1,186 in magnitude, and this compares to other large revisions that we've had in the past. We noticed years ago that Trousdale County's per capita income was increasing in an unexplained way. In fact, at its peak in 2014, they reached third in the state of Tennessee for per capita income, and we shared this concern with the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And in case you don't know, that's Trousdale County, a rather rural county. And here's a zip code, 37022, that is both in Sumner County and Trousdale County. And what was happening is that all of the income that was earned in the zip code was being assigned to Trousdale County, with the effect being that Trousdale income was increased, divided by the same population. And so with the revision and the use of the 9-digit zip codes, which do not cross county lines, Trousdale's per capita income was reduced, or revised, I should say. And this is the effect that it had on their fiscal capacity, the bump on the right being the time period where their per capita income was increasing rapidly, and then the decrease at the end is where the revision occurred. I'll now go through some of the trends in counties' fiscal capacities, and based on last year's presentation, I'll use Shelby as an example, in particular Shelby's property tax, and show how it drives their changes in fiscal capacity. Here are the trends for all the counties. Green is an uptrend. Blue means fiscal capacity is staying about the same, and yellow is a downtrend. And you can see in the lower left-hand corner, Shelby is yellow and has had a downtrend in fiscal capacity. And part of the reason is here we have the 3-year average property tax base per student. The blue line is the 95 county average, and the red line is Shelby County. You can see on the left side, Shelby was a little bit above the state average, or the 95 county average. But over time, it increased, but it didn't increase fast enough. And so it is now a little bit less than the 95 county average. And with the result, the red line here is Shelby County, and so their fiscal capacity has declined over time. Finally, I'll update the situation with the virtual school students in Union County. Here we're showing the local revenue per student for Union County, and the blue line there is the actual revenue per student, and it's been going up a little bit lately with decreases in the number of virtual school students. And the red line is what it would have been estimated to have been had they without the virtual school students. And this is important because changes caused by this reduction in Union County's fiscal capacity are offset by the increase in the other 94 counties' fiscal capacity.
Mayor Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, let me ask again now, that there are 55 counties that are trending downward now?
I don't remember the exact number, but that sounds about right.
I believe that's, assuming that I believe the number's 55. Why is that? I guess that many counties that are trending downward, is it a movement of, is population in Tennessee out of rural areas into urban areas part of it? Is the property values in urban areas going up and property values in rural counties going down? It's under the Fox model, I believe, income is not considered under the Fox model, correct?
Correct.
So individual or personal income for that 50% of the formula wouldn't be a consideration. So why would so many counties in Tennessee be trending downward, do you think?
Yeah, one thing to remember is it's a per student model. That's easy to forget. The other thing you could say is that a lot of the growth in the property tax, sales tax bases are concentrated in a very few counties. And in order for a county to be just blue, to stay steady, they've got to match the average of the state. And with that concentration of growth in those very few counties, that pulls up the average.
Yeah, and it's all got to come to 100%, I understand.
Right.
But we don't know if it's property values or sales tax numbers or service burden. And let me make sure I'm right on service burden now. Service burden a factor in both Fox and TACIR formula?
No, it's just
TACIR. And that's the percentage of K through 12 children relative to the total population, right?
Yeah, public school.
Okay. Yes. So we don't know what that number, for example, is doing in the counties that are trending downward. We don't know if it's a loss of population or what it is.
That is the factor with the least weight in the model. So it's not having much effect on any county. In fact, from my analysis, it's not the most important factor for any county because it's so lightly weighted.
What would you say is the most important factor?
Well, it depends on the county. For Shelby County, for example, I highlighted property tax. The tax bases are important. Also, the tax exportability, the residential farm assessment percentage is very important. And then after that, probably the per capita income, also fairly heavily weighted.
It's per capita income and not median household income, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question, and this specifically applies to Sevier County, and I think, unfortunately, I know the answer. But when we were talking about physical capacity, it is based upon last year's experience, and the problem, as everyone is aware, in Sevier County, we've had a major natural disaster, which has had a very negative impact on assessment and sales tax, both of which have gone down. And so that natural disaster will not be taken into consideration in any of these formulas as we move forward, because we're going to, our BEP amount of money is going to be based upon what happened in 2016 next year, and 2016 was a banner year in Sevier County, and so our physical capacity is probably going to increase when, in fact, our assessment and our sales tax are both trending downward, and hopefully that's going to not going to be a long-term issue. We feel confident it's going to be a short-term issue, but still yet it's going to be a problem for us in that we're losing a lot of tax revenue, both property tax and sales tax, and then our physical capacity by the formula will be going up, so we may lose state money as well for schools. So we're sort of in a catch-22 situation that I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if there's some way you can do something to account for a natural disaster like that, but I would hope that the powers that be would take a look at it and see if there's any kind of adjustment that could be had for something that's as unusual as the event we've had. Thank you.
Yes, I would point out that there are some lags. One is the data lag. We have to wait until these data are published. The other thing is that we use a 3-year average of the data, so if there's a change, we would only incorporate the first year of that change, and then it would be fully accounted for over 3 years. Any other questions?
Chairman Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, I just want to apologize. I get so frustrated with this formula and what it does to some school districts, and we just laugh it off almost. And I don't mean you or anybody on the committee laughs it off, but you know, we got some problems, and we have to find a solution to it. That's all I'm trying to say. So I apologize on my line of questioning. So please accept it as that.
Were you seeking anybody down there seeking? Thank you, Charles. Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, don't worry about it. We're used to it up here, so it doesn't bother us. So.
Okay, all is well. Is that, there we go.
Thank you, Chairman. That's my presentation.
Dare I ask if others have questions? This is one of the most difficult presentations we have each year, and anybody who takes it on is to be commended, as always. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Michael, one thing, and it may not be in this presentation, but I remember when we did BEP 2.0, and that might have been in 09, I'm not sure. Yeah. But one of the things we talked about, and I'm trying to remember exactly, you know, we talked about the dial where you could dial it up where if it's fully funded, we were supposed to be close to 75-25, and I don't know if we've ever got close to that. I think we're more like probably 62, 38, something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about, where it's state percentage? When we did the BEP 2.0, when it was, and we wanted to dial it up. So I know it's on one of the first 2 pages. Do you know where we are exactly right now? And one of the things, too, why it makes this a difficult subject, Mr. Chairman, is when you have the way the BEP formula is set up, like K through 5, it's supposed to be 1 teacher to every 20 students, something like that. And if you may go over and you have 3 classes in the 4th grade and you have 65 students, all of a sudden you've kicked it over from over 1 teacher to every 20, and it really affects your local LEA because they have to deal with that. They'll have to hire an extra teacher by the formula. There's not any flexibility built in. That's what I think some of the things we need to look at to give some flexibility at the local level, and it causes the cost factor to go up. So there's a lot of ins and outs. So that, if you would just go over that just a little bit about the percentages.
I think you were referring to the state share and the local share for the 4 cost components. They've stayed the same since last year. Is there any particular question about that? Or?
I think he was reaching back further than.
I think, Mr. Chairman, our thoughts are that's the goal. I just don't think we're that high. I think, in your sheet that you got there, the 4 steps are determine the BEP funding. Instructional salaries, 30 local, 70 state. Benefit costs 30 local, 70 state. Other classroom costs 25, 75. And then non-classroom costs 50-50. I think that's the goal. I don't know if we've reached those goals. Some of our local, that's why it's going to be very beneficial, Mr. Chairman, to bring in someone from the LEAs around here that can tell us exactly. I think that was the goal, but I'm not sure we're reaching that goal.
Yeah, I'll just point out that that's the statewide percentages, and it's the local share percentage. It's not the actual local funding percentage. So just to clarify.
Thank you, Senator Tracy. Any other questions or comments? We don't have to take any action on this. It is what it is. And if hearing none, well, thank you. Thank you, Michael. That is the end of the agenda for today. We are scheduled to resume tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. right here. And if there's nothing further, for the good of the order today, we'll stand in adjournment till 8:30 a.m. tomorrow next. Thank you.